All right, well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for coming today, and I'd like to thank Heath and the rest of the Topaz team for inviting me back. I really enjoy these webinars and sharing some tips and tricks that I know with the Topaz tools with all of you, and it's nice to be able to do that. So today is a raw to ready session. I've done raw to ready webinars in the past. And it's one of the most highly requested sessions that I used to get. So I thought I could go through the raw to ready process. We're going to be going into a raw image, going through the raw processor, taking it into Photoshop, and then using Topaz tools to finish off the creative workflow. One of the pieces of feedback that I did get with my raw to ready sessions that I used to do was that we only did one image, and it was commented upon that, okay, do you really take that much time to actually do every single image? And the answer is no. If it's just kind of a snapshot, or if the exposure is in pretty good shape in the first place, to go from a raw to ready for me can actually be fairly quick. And I wanted to show several images going from that complete raw processing to the final image ready to size and print or share online. So, and give you a better idea of how you can do that a little bit more quickly. So with that, let's talk about which images we're going to be going over. I am going to do a couple quick raw to ready processes first, and then go into a family shot that takes it a little bit more in depth in the processing because it is dealing with portraits. So I hope to get through 3 images here today. Let's go ahead and start with what we have here on the screen. This is an image I took in Panama when I visited there a couple Christmases ago, and this is actually the finished image. It looks a bit different in the raw form. So we'll just go ahead and close out of there and go through the process. Now, I believe I showed this image before, but not the full process, and I thought I could have fun doing that. This is a more typical workflow for me, going from raw to ready. Where I will do some editing within the camera raw, and then take it into Photoshop, edit it just a tiny bit, maybe get rid of some spots and straighten it out, and then take it into Topaz, finish it off with Clarity or Restyle, and then I'm done. So that's what we're going to show here in this particular image. I'm going to go ahead and reset the camera raw defaults because I've already gone through camera raw with this image, so it is recognizing that in the file information. So I'm just going to reset that so you see what it originally was straight out of the camera. One thing that I like to do first is take a look at the edges of my image and any sort of distortion that might be happening. I've noticed with some of my lenses I get a little bit more extra distortion and vignetting around the edges of my image due to the lens itself. And Camera Raw has an area in there called Lens Correction, so I tend to start off there. I'm going to click on that tab, Lens Correction, right here. And typically I just click Enable Lens Profile Correction. It's going to recognize my make and model and the profile on my camera and correct the default amount. That correction is usually pretty good for me. At this point, I'm done. But if you want to maybe bring back some of that vignetting, maybe you didn't like the distortion, or but you want it to be a little bit darker on those edges, you can come in and actually change the distortion and the vignetting settings individually with these sliders. And I do that sometimes, but for this particular one, I don't need to. Now I'm going to go back into the basic tab all the way on the left. One of the reasons I also do lens correction first is because the histogram at the top of the image is showing the colors of those darker edges, and whenever you take the lens correction off, I'll show you, you'll see your histogram changes quite a bit. So it's kind of pointless to go through all of your exposing, or for me I found it's easier to avoid having to go back to my exposure settings once I do lens correction because it's going to change my histogram. So I just like to do that first and get back over there. For my raw workflow, the idea is just to get a good exposure, to make sure that the highlights aren't being blown out, make sure that the shadows aren't being blocked, and have a nice looking histogram to take into Photoshop and continue with my creative process. So that's just very basic for me. I tend to always warm up my images, so I'm just going to take that temperature slider and move it towards the yellow. I'm not going to worry about my tint on this image. I will increase my exposure just a little bit. The exposure is tending to go to the left on the histogram, so as you move it to the right, you'll see that everything starts to brighten up. I'm only going to do a tad bit, maybe about 0.1, and then jump down to my highlight, shadows, whites, and blacks. This is an area I almost always touch during the raw conversion process. I tend to take my highlights down just so they aren't getting blown out, and the whites. And then if I see that the everything's a little bit dark, the blacks are starting to block up, I might come down to my black slider, open that up, and shadows as well. Move it to the right and expose some of the information within the shadow areas. Because I know I'm going to be using Topaz and I prefer Topaz Clarity over the Camera Raw Clarity, Vibrance, and Saturation, I do not touch these sliders. If I had an issue still with my histogram that I wasn't able to get to where I wanted to within the basic tab, I will sometimes go into my tone curve and work there as well. But other than that, I move on to my sharpening and noise reduction. First thing I do is get rid of my sharpening just while I'm working on my noise reduction. So it's not sharpening any of the noise that's there. And if I have an image where the ISO is very low, here it's ISO 100, and I don't have large chunky noise caused by high ISOs, I usually don't go into denoise because it is such a robust program. I only take my night shots or images that really need strong noise reduction in there. Otherwise, I might just do my noise reduction here, and that's what we're going to do for this image. I am going to use denoise on another image that needs it, but for this one it doesn't. I'm going to jump down here to my zoom levels and just go up to 200. Move my viewfinder to an area that might have a little bit of extra noise, so the shadow area on the glass is a good example. I'm going to take my color down and start from 0. And you can see that really did bring back quite a bit of color noise, but I like to start from 0 so I can do it myself. I'm going to jump up to the top of my noise reduction area over the luminance slider and start moving it to the right. If you're not familiar with some of the tips or tricks when you're in Camera Raw, if you click on your Alt key, you're able to change it to a monotone image that you can see the noise much easier, not be distracted by any colors that might be happening. So there's not a ton of noise. I'm just going to take that up to about 20, and that looks good. There is some additional color noise, so I will take that back up until I see it starting reducing, and I see that it has reduced, and I'm pretty happy here. Now I'm going to go back up to my sharpening. I do tend to do some sharpening within all of my images, including portraits in Camera Raw. I like what the sharpening does. I tend to take it up to about 40 or 50, but I also mask it out of a lot of the areas. So first we're going to increase, and I'm really just looking at the larger edges, the really clear-cut edges, not necessarily the interior flat areas, because we're going to mask that out real quick in just a minute. I'm going to increase my detail as well. Now that I've done that, I want to mask it out of things like the sky or flat areas that don't need additional sharpening or detail, and it actually will distract from the image if I add it. So let's go back to fitting within the view. And I'm going to come down to this masking slider, press my Alt key, and start masking out. By taking the masking slider to the right, you're able to add masking, and it's determined by how much detail is in that area. So if you take the masking slider all the way up, you'll notice it's just the sharp edges. It's just the really strong edges within your image. And as you take it back down, if you take the masking way down, it's going to start sharpening and putting detail into every surface. So I want to take it out of the sky completely and really only affect the stronger lines of the building. So I'm just going to take that up to about 0.75 or 75, excuse me. And I'm happy. I don't do any grayscale conversions in Camera Raw, tend not to do any split toning or effects at all. And at this point, I would go to my presets, add a preset, especially if I knew that I took several shots of this building, which I did. And so I can apply these same raw settings as a good starting point for the rest of the images in that particular batch. And I've already done that, called Panama Outside. And now I'm going to open the image into Photoshop. Within Photoshop, I have a workflow for myself. Now, some of the things I'm doing, you're going to say, wait, didn't she miss something? Or, oh, I would do this differently. And that's fine. Everybody develops their own workflow and their own best way of working. And it can always be improved upon, mine as well. So I might not show everything. This is just a good example of what I do. So hopefully you get something out of that regarding the Topaz plugins and maybe some of the additional workflows I do in Photoshop and Camera Raw. All right, now the first thing I like to look at is my horizon line. Is it straight? We took out the distortion of the lens, but you can kind of see back on the horizon that my buildings are all tilting a bit left, even the ones in the middle of the image, which should be straight. So first I'm going to work on straightening and cropping my image. Let me just show you there. Everything's just a little tilting to the left. So I'm just going to come over here to the crop icon, click on crop, and you'll see the crop field come on the image. If you go over to a corner of the image, the mouse will turn into a curved mouse that allows for you to click and then drag your image and straighten it out. So this actually looks much straighter. I'm focusing on this tall white building here and lining it up with the grid so it's much straighter. When straightening it out, I kind of clipped or took away some of the space here on the left of the image that I liked. So I am going to crop it down a little and move the area that it's going to crop over to the left so it opens up the space on this side of the building a little bit more. And now that I've done the straightening and cropping, I'm ready to go. I'm just going to press enter, and I've completed that step. The next step that I usually take, especially because my focus shield within my camera is a mess right now, and it usually has 1 or 2 spots on it, I go into my healing brush and use the content aware, because majority of the time the content aware brush is going to resolve any spot issues that I might have because of my lens. Maybe I didn't clean my lens, or any issues that you might just want to get rid of. Usually it's stuff like within the sky that you see really clearly. And you can see I do have one here on the upper left. It's just a little piece of fuzz, or it actually might be a scratch on my focus shield, so I'm not sure, but it's there. I'm going to just get rid of it, use that content-aware healing brush, and it's gone that quickly. In my workflow, I like to scroll in a little bit more and make sure I really did clean everything up as far as the dust or spots or scratches that might be there. So here you see a little, very faint dot, which I can easily get rid of. So right there. It looks like it might be a bird, might not be, but I'm going to get rid of it. And I go through this process with almost every single image, even if it is just a quick workflow. All right, now that I've completed that step, that's when I'm ready to go into Topaz to do some of my creative processing. I'm going to make a copy of my layer over here on the right by pressing Command J. It's Control J on a PC, or I'm sorry, on a Windows machine. And I'm going to name this layer Clarity. Clarity is my go-to. If there's one product I use all the time, it's Topaz Clarity. It's amazing. The ability to control contrast as well as it does is something I haven't been able to find in other pieces of software. I'm going to press Reset and get back to my image. Now we do have, there are collections of different presets over here on the left. My everyday workflow is me coming over to the Clarity tab, opening it up, and going through these 4 top sliders manually. I find that I get where I want to be quicker because it is such a quick process. Now with the clarity adjustments, I usually focus on the areas within an image that I want to add this to, because a lot of these areas I might not want to add micro contrast to, like a sky. Adding micro contrast to the sky is going to kind of make it more crunchy and bring out detail that you don't necessarily want. So for the clarity and dynamic area, I'm going to scroll into the building itself and focus on that and not the sky. I'm going to add some micro contrast. This is great for textures like lawns and leaves and bricks, any sort of texture you might want to pop out. Low contrast is going to be great for the mid-tones as well as the medium contrast, just to bring out some of that mid-tone contrast that otherwise has a little bit of difficulty. Once I get through the micro, low, and medium contrasts, I usually find that my blacks have started to block up. I'm losing information there, and it's increasing some of the highlights as well to be too bright. My high contrast almost always goes to the left. And what that does is allow for me to have mid-tone contrast and texture contrast while still having really open shadows and highlights that aren't going too white. So here's before, here's after. And you can see these lines are just starting to pop off the windows. The texture is just popping off a little bit better. The shadows have become more dynamic, where they're darker but you still have really great information in there. And that's what I like to do with my clarity sliders. If you find that taking your dynamic slider, the high contrast, all the way to the left still does not achieve the openness of your shadows that you want, you can always come to your black level in the tone level sliders below it and start to work there as well. This has a lot of great use to it as well. I'm not going to use any of the tone sliders for this particular workflow because I don't need it, but I am going to show you the masking tool. As I said before, using the micro contrast and low contrast and adding all that contrast will start to make your smooth areas have more texture. For portraits, for skies, this usually isn't ideal because you'll start to see almost noise-like details start to pop out. Within Clarity, there's a masking tool that I absolutely love. I'm going to scroll out of here, show it to you, and mask out my sky very quickly. I just opened up my masking tool. I see the image up here on the right that's showing a preview of what my mask is going to look like. I click on my color range tool, and once that happens, a little green dot appears. If you put that in an area, whatever color you're wanting to mask out, it's going to start to build a mask for you. So you don't have to go through the work of building this mask that along these edges or doing any brush work. You can just quickly mask out an area based upon the color. So I'm going to put that on the sky color and increase the size all the way of my color range size tool here. and look at my thumbnail up here on the top right, I do notice that some of the areas of the building are starting to be masked as well, and I do not want that. So I'm going to take my sensitivity slider up. What the sensitivity slider does is make the selection that you've made for your color and make the range narrower and not grab as much color on each side of the specific color that you chose. The great thing about this tool, I'm going to press OK and create my mask, is that you can go back in, press it again, and either build the mask to make it darker or move it to a different area. I'm going to come down into this lighter area of the sky that looks a little bit more gray and grab that information as well. I'm going to press OK. Now again, what that did was give me a little bit of my building that's getting masked out, so very quickly I'm just going to click on my brush, take it to a normal brush, and mask that out manually. It doesn't take very long. My strength is all the way because I want to make it completely white. I'm going to take my brush down and my hardness all the way up and quickly just scroll or paint over that area. I used the wrong brush. Let's undo that and go to my reveal brush, which is going to be my white brush. And I'll reveal that area very quickly. And now, if I press before and after, you see that it's only affecting the areas that I want it to, which are going to be the foreground, the building, and the clouds itself. Here's before and after, no longer affecting the sky. The hue, saturation, and luminance filter, which is below clarity, is also very awesome. It breaks down your image into 8 different colors and then gives you an overall option as well. I tend to go more towards my saturation and luminance to affect just certain colors and not affect other colors within my image. With this image, I just want to take the sky a little bit more blue and a little bit darker to kind of make it pop against those clouds a bit more. So in my saturation, I will take my blue slider and increase the saturation just to bring out a little bit more color. I'm also going to do the same thing for my aqua. See if that helps. Yes, it does. I just want a little pop. Here's before and after. And take that up even more. And the luminance slider is great for darkening skies as well. So I'm just going to take the blue slider and move it down and bring some darkness into my sky a little bit more. Here's before and after. Now the same thing happens with this tab as well, that it affects everything within the image. And I really didn't want to affect the building itself, and you see that by changing that blue, it is affecting the building. You can easily create another mask that's specific for the hue, saturation, and luminance as well by doing the same thing that I did before. Except this time I'm going to mask in the sky. The way that I do that is click on the Invert tab to get a black mask to start off with, go to my white Reveal button, and now when I click my Color Range tool, it's going to mask in certain areas wherever I put the selector. And I'm going to just go through the exact same process here. We don't need to really show it since you've already seen it. But it does show you how quickly you can make a very accurate mask. Oops. There we go. Got to grab that black. There we are. And now I'm done with clarity. Let me show you before and after. If you see something's a little strong, I think my sky went a little strong, you can jump up to this opacity area at the top of the each of the filters and just take that down. And now I'm only showing about 66% of what I had. So I'm going to press OK and get back into Photoshop. Again, clarity is my go-to. I use it all the time on every image, whether it's portraits, architecture, wedding shots. If it's something that's really creative, The one area I don't usually, or the one time I usually don't use it is with if I'm going into black and white effects, because black and white effects has a ton of control in there, and I can get the shadow and highlight work done within that particular module itself or filter itself. All right, I'm going to make a quick layer copy of my clarity and go into the next filter. Just to finish it off, the plugin I'm going to use here is Restyle. Restyle is a toning program that can give you thousands of tones of color very quickly, but there's a couple ways that I use it a little bit differently that I want to show you. Let me just say Restyle. And take that into Topaz Restyle. I rarely ever use Topaz Restyle the way it's intended. I know that's kind of not exactly great news, but that's just what I do. I automatically, because of the strong effects that happen within Restyle, let me show you here in the fashion category that we're in. You can see here as I scroll over all of these presets, it is very strong tones, and it's a rare occurrence where I'll find an image that just works really beautifully with all of these tones because it's just so strong. Now, I found a way that you can look at all of these images in a different way, and the way that you can do it is by coming over, or all of these different adjustments in a different way. What you can do is come over to the Restyle tab and immediately go into your blending modes icon. Go over your blending modes until you like to see, until it starts to show you something that might stand out as useful to see a lot of different tones in that way. The color one for me is a good one to go to, as well as the screen. The screen is great for portraits. I'm going to start off with the color mode and take that opacity down to about 50, maybe even lower, maybe about 40. And now that I've taken the tone down to a setting that I like that's a little bit less obvious, now I can view all of these presets in this same screen and opacity. So I'm going to go into my architecture tab, come to the icon for the grid view so I can view lots of presets all at once. Restyle has so many different filters in there, or effects. This grid view is definitely necessary. So what we're seeing here is the architecture presets all at a 35% opacity in the color screen, or the color blending mode. That is why they all look a little bit more subtle, and it might be something a little bit more useful for more of your images. The way that I use Restyle is I just, again, scroll through these effects in the mode that I want them in, and when something starts to pop out at me, I click on a similar, I click on it to find more similar presets to that. The way you can do that, I really like this Peach Days preset over here on the right. To find images that, or presets that compare to this type of look, you can just click on the little magnifier and say find similar. And Restyle is going to search all of the effects it has, no matter what category it's in, and find the top 16 presets that look like the preset that you chose. For me, I'm really drawn to the cyan tinted tea rose, so I'll just click on that. And when you click on it, you'll notice when you go back into the full screen mode that it applies the effect at full strength in the regular blending mode. So I just quickly come over here, go to my color, change it back to where I had it before. Here's before, here's after. I got that kind of slight, more dynamic tone that I was looking for this particular image very quickly without much work within Restyle. I'm going to press OK, and I'm done with this image. So this actually I took too long to go through, closer to 25 minutes. The next one I'm going to go through quite quickly. But this gives you an idea. You can go through from a raw image and just go through the raw processor, a couple of the Topaz programs pretty quickly and get to a final image. So here's before. This is after the camera raw, and here's after. At this point, I'm ready to flatten the image, resize it to where I need to go, do a little sharpening if needed based upon the output, and then move on to the next image. So for the next image, I want to go into black and white effects. I mentioned that it is a robust program that has a lot of tools in there, and when I'm working with a black and white conversion, my usual process is to go through the raw processing within Adobe Camera Raw and any sort of cropping and straightening in Photoshop, getting rid of those spots and scratches if I see any, and then immediately go into black and white effects. So for this image, I'll go ahead and use this beach shot. I'm going to press open. This was an image I took recently at Muir Beach, located in the Muir Woods. So I went to San Francisco for the first time. It was awesome. But this was a great little area, and I was just taking a few snapshots. This isn't something I would necessarily work on for a long time because it already has a lot of what I need. It has some great contrast, and when I looked at this scene while I was taking the image, I knew that I wanted to take it into black and white effects. Number one, the light was very strong. It was midday. I wasn't going to get a lot of great light, and I saw that it was already pretty contrasty, and I just thought black and white effects would do, or a black and white image would really work well here. So when I'm thinking I'm going into a black and white conversion, I don't really worry about the temperature so much. Maybe just take it a little bit more warm. I am going to jump into my lens corrections, enable the lens profile corrections, not do any sort of customization. I'm happy with what happened right there. Go back to my basic. I'm going to take my exposure up just a little towards the right and lighten up everything. You can see up here on the histogram that there's a little space of no color, and that's just saying that I have a little bit of room to play with my exposure by moving it to the right and opening up some of those shadows within the rocks and the trees and try to get some of that. Let me take that up a bit more, maybe 0.25. As I take that up though, I'm noticing a lot of my highlights, especially within the sky, are being blown out. So I'm going to come down to my whites, take that down, get a little bit more detail within those clouds, take the highlights down as well, try to get a more, or an exposure that I can really work with here. I am going to take my blacks up to try to get a little bit more detail, shadows up, and you can see that it's starting to open up those shadows. Take the highlights down at the same time. And I'm pretty happy with that. Yes. And at this point, I don't want to do anything else. I don't go through all of these other tools. Actually, I just I misspoke there. I usually go through my detail and sharpening. But again, I'm just going to go quickly here. And this was ISO 100 as well, so the noise just isn't bad, but there are a lot of shadows that show a little bit extra noise, especially in the color. So I'm going to quickly just add some noise reduction and a little bit more color noise reduction. Now I'm going to go up into my sharpening, go back to my fit in view, take my sharpening amount up, and then mask out the sky and a lot of the areas that I'm not wanting a lot of detail. Maybe add a bit more detail in there as well. Okay, here's before camera raw. Now I'm at a point where I'm happy. That's after. I'm going to say open image. And let's check out the cropping and straightening tools, see if I need to straighten anything up. I'm happy with the crop. I'm happy with the current composition, so I don't even need to use this. I'll go ahead and say no. I don't see any spots that need to be taken care of at this point. Let me scroll in just to make sure. I see a little one right there. Let me just grab my healing brush, again in the content aware type, and just going to do a quick, there we go. All right, happy there. Now I'm ready to go into black and white effects. I'm only going to go into one program here. Let me just put black and white effects so I know which program I used. Go into filter, Topaz black and white effects. This is by far one of my favorite programs of the Topaz collection, and it really has to do with the presets over here on the left. I think the presets were designed to be a little bit more realistic as far as historical processes, and there's just a lot of presets that you're able to go through quickly and get some really neat effects. So I'm going to say reset all and get back to my straight conversion that Topaz will automatically do. And I already know that I like the Platinum collection within black and white effects, so I usually start there and see if I can find anything. Let me just scroll down and see if anything pops out at me, and that's really how I went about editing this one already. Okay, so I really like the contrast that's happening in this Platinum, but not so much the tone. That's very easily solved. So let's go ahead and open that up. That's Platinum 5. Not sure why it's not. Interesting. That might be a bug. It's applying or it's showing the snapshot from above it. Okay, well this one is the Platinum 5. And again, I like the contrast, what's happening. I definitely want to work on it a little bit more and get some more dynamics out of the tones altogether. And I also want to change the tones. So those are my two main things that I'm going to be focusing on. Also, selectively getting my sky to be a bit darker as well to pop against those white clouds. We have a lot of tools, or there are a lot. I say we because I was with Topaz for so long, but Topaz has a lot of tools within black and white effects that are awesome. Within the basic exposure tab, you're going to see boost blacks and boost whites down here. If you start to see from your preset that you want to open up to your shadows or get those highlights to come down a bit, you can do that very quickly with these boost blacks and boost whites. So I'm going to come into my boost blacks and get a little bit more shadow and pop there. I like that. And then the boost whites, I'm going to take to the left to try to get a little bit more detail into those clouds. And you can see it just brings more information into the clouds that I can work with, and it does it very quickly. Here's before the basic exposure changes and after. So those are some great contrast tools to know about. In the adaptive exposure, you can start to really get creative with the black and white processing because the technology that's in Adjust is also within this adaptive exposure module, which will just balance out the tones within your image and process it in a different way which you can take really high and start to get kind of a pseudo HDR effect, or you can apply a little bit less dramatically and just get really great localized contrast coming out within the certain areas. So here's before adaptive exposure, and here's after. I'm going to boost up my details just a little bit more. Okay. The next area I was, thinking about was the sky. Within black and white effects, you have color sensitivity, which will allow for you to do a similar thing with just colors that we saw within clarity. It breaks, the color sensitivity breaks your image down into 6 different color ranges, and then you're able to come in and manipulate the darkness or lightness of those colors. So I know my sky was originally blue. I'm going to come down to my blue and take it left, which is going to make it a little bit more dark in the blue areas. And you can start to see that the tone in between the clouds becomes more contrasted, darkens up, and just adds a little bit more dynamics to my sky. I'm also going to do the same with the cyan. Okay, there we go. And at this point, I'm pretty happy. The one thing that I did talk about was changing the tone, though. You can find all the tone settings within the finishing touches. There's 2 different types of tones, silver and paper tone, which is basically a duotone. You add some tone to your highlights, you add some tone to your shadows, and then they blend together. We also have something called the quad tone within black and white effects, where you can get very specific tone into 4 different regions of your image. So it's about twice as powerful as the silver and paper tone. It just depends on which one you want to use, which one is working for that particular preset. But within the quad tone, if you see that it's using the quad tone, don't get don't get overwhelmed with the process here. Just look for the tone that you're not liking. So for this image, I want to make it a little bit more brown. It's kind of going purple. If I look at my quad tones over here, I see, okay, there's this color 2 region color that's a little bit more purple. I just want to take that particular one and make it a little bit more brown. So I'm going to double click on it. It's going to pop open a select color slider, and I can choose the color that I want, which is going to be more brown, maybe a tad bit lighter. I'll go that color. And I'm going to say OK. Now watch, when I do this, it'll change just that tone and go a little bit more brown. And now I'm really happy with this, and I didn't have to do all of these different colors, and I didn't have to touch the region sliders. I usually like to touch the region sliders and play around with putting darker tones into certain ranges of my image, tonal ranges, or opening up and really getting a lot of brightness coming in as well. You can really play around. There's a lot of strength within this quad tone. So now I've darkened my sky, changed the contrast to where I wanted it to be, and changed my tone. For this image, I'm just seeing a vignette. I'm going to quickly click on the vignette, open that up, take my vignette strength up so it's not as strong, take my vignette size up so it's not as small. I want it to really open up in the center. And I'm going to take my vignette curvature and move it to the left to get more of a square versus a circular vignette. So here's before, here's after. Fairly quick, just to add that one little finishing touch. I'm going to press OK, and I'm already done with my black and white conversion. The last one I'm going to try to get through in the next 5 minutes or so is actually a portrait image. And while that has more steps in it, it's not that long of a process. So I'll try to keep up with what I'm going through as I go through it, but I can do a portrait fairly quickly without having to take an hour to do so, I promise. All right, so this is the original image out of the box, or the raw image out of the camera. And I like the tone, it's pretty good, but I can definitely see where it could improve. I want to take my histogram and open up just a little bit more so I see their faces and get a little bit more punch there. I have that. I'm okay with the shadows and blacks actually. They're looking pretty good. The highlights though might come down, not the whites, but taking the highlights down is going to allow for me to take some of the brightness down without affecting the really, really bright colors, so kind of those mid-tone ranges. And I'm happy there. I forgot to do this. See how much that changes? There we go. For this one, I actually want to go into denoise. So what I'm going to do is take my sharpening completely down and my color noise reduction completely down. I don't want to add any noise effects whatsoever. I don't want to sharpen it. I don't want to reduce it. If I do this within Camera Raw, it makes it more difficult in denoise. I just know that from experience because it's sharpening the noise if you sharpen beforehand, which makes it harder to get rid of those edges on the noise. And if I know I'm going into denoise, I take those down. At this point, I'm happy. I'm going to say open image. And the first thing that I'll do before doing anything else is go into denoise. Actually, we can do some cropping in real quick. Just straightening up that horizon line. I'm using the ocean behind them as my line to go by. And I do want to do a little bit of cropping, focusing on just balancing the composition, kind of using the tool here on the crop tool to play with the rule of thirds. And I'm happy right there. Press enter and now do a quick copy, go into denoise. Denoise 6 came out with camera profile settings. I use them all the time. Let me get this larger. There we go. I use them all the time. So over on the presets, you can find if your camera has presets. Mine does. Canon EOS 5D Mark II, and this was 800. And I just noticed that within the Camera Raw settings. So I'm going to click on the EOS 5D Mark II ISO 800, and you'll notice that it automatically takes out all that noise you're seeing. Here's before and after. All the color noise disappears. You still see detail within important detailed areas, and it's that quick with denoise 6. I'm just going to check a couple other places. There we go. Make sure I'm not taking any detail out of skin, which I'm not. Everything looks good. Press OK. At this point, I then go into Topaz Clarity. If you've never used Topaz Clarity on a portrait, you are missing out. Micro contrast for skin is amazing. If you take your portrait in there, if there's only one slider that needs to be used, it's that micro contrast. So I'm going to take this in there, use the micro contrast, maybe do a little bit of work on colors on their skin, and then do a quick mask in there as well. Press OK. There we are. That's denoise. Let me do another layer. And now go into Clarity. For portraits, I immediately go to about 50% to see. Even 1:1 is good. So I can see the actual detail that I'm adding and anything that's happening at the 100% view. with portraits, especially portraits that are getting printed and you're looking closely at them, it's important on the screen to look closely at them as well. When I'm editing skin, I want to make sure I don't over soften and make them look plastic, but also help with some of the lines and then see it clearly. So within Clarity, again, micro contrast is your friend. I usually take it down to about -0.2 for portraits by default. Here's before. Here's after. It's hard to see, but if you notice, I'll go a little bit even more. It just smooths everything out in a very natural way. Pores become smooth, less contrast, less texture contrast on the skin is happening, but it's not removing detail. So you still see the person's character without over softening their skin completely. I really love that slider. Because I'm just working on the skin, not the rest of the image for this particular session of Clarity, I'm just looking at the skin and not what it's doing to the rest of the image. I'm going to do a very quick mask as well. Medium contrast is also going to be your friend within Clarity for portraits. If you take that medium contrast slider up, you'll see it adds contrast to some of the shadows and structure of the face, or it even opens it up. So somebody who has dark circles under their eyes, you can quickly come in and manipulate that with the medium contrast, or add a little bit more as well. So for this image, I'm actually going to add a little bit, just to get a little bit more definition in the shadows without affecting the rest of the contrast. And now I'm going to apply it to only the skin. And the way that I'm going to do that is the way that I already showed you. We are going to do a reveal, though. I'll invert that and make a black mask. Click on my reveal button, go into my color range, and put my color selector on the skin tone. And over here on the right, that's how quickly I was able to get a mask of their skin showing and blocking out the rest of the image. I'm going to take that size up so I start to get all of the people in the image, but I'm also going to take that sensitivity up so it's not affecting the other colors like the sand behind as much. But you can see it's a very good mask for skin already. I'm going to say OK and do one more really quickly. I can see I'm coming up on my time, so
hurry, hurry.
I will stay after and answer questions if that's okay, Heath. Okay, just did a secondary color of the skin and got a little bit more clear of a mask saying okay, and I'm happy with this. Here's before, here's after. It's hard to tell, but when you look at skin up close, it's really a lifesaver if you're wanting to do very quick manipulation of just smoothing, but in a very natural way. Now for this image, I wanted to go into, to finish it off, Restyle is an option that I use quite a bit, but I've also been using texture effects on portraits. Usually texture effects are really great for heavy texture and more obvious effects, but it can be very subtle as well. So I'm going to go, and I like a lot of the colors that are in there. So I'm going to go into Texture Effects 2. And I know that recently some fall effects were released by Topaz, which they looked really beautiful. So I'm just going to search the community for those. The way you can do that is go to the source file up here on the bar, go to the community. I'm going to scroll my presets out so I can see more at once, and then click on the three dots, go to my search option, put in fall, because I believe that's what they were called, see what comes up. And there we go. So we have Topaz Fall Foliage, Fall Portrait. I love this. I really like this golden hour. It's very strong, but I'm thinking visually, if I put this into a certain blend mode, it might be really beautiful in the background and on their skin tone. So I'm going to click on that. And now it's on my image over here. And let's see what we can do really quickly. Let's open it up. Oops. There we go. Let me download it really quickly and now open it up. I'm going to go into my basic adjustments and just check out what's going on. I want to bring the clarity completely back. I also don't know if I want to change those highlights so much, so I'm just double clicking to get those back to the default of 0. And let me continue. I don't want to add any texture, so I'm just going to turn that off by clicking right there. Yeah, it looks like a lot of clarity is being added back into that basic texture, so I'm just going to click on that, make sure to get that clarity out of there for the skin tone reasons. And now that I've gotten this to a point where I like the texture of it, I'm going to go into my masking, open that up, and, oh, not my masking, I'm sorry, the opacity and blend modes, and just scroll over and see if I see something that I like. Let me turn that masking back off. There we go. And I really like, let's see here, this just gives you an idea. I know that we're running out of time, so I'll go ahead and turn it over. But if I like the overlay or soft light, I can click on that, take my opacity down. You can quickly get some very nice tone to portraits within Texture Effects as well. So I've been using those for some fun tones for my images. Go ahead and press OK. I hope this gives you at least an idea of how I go from a raw to ready image using Camera Raw, Photoshop, and Topaz. I do very limited work within Photoshop itself, usually using it for more technical tools, and do most of the creative processing within Topaz itself. Once I go back into Photoshop, just finish it off by resizing the image to whatever output it needs to be. I hope that gives you some good tips and tricks, Heath. I'll turn it back over to you. I know we're at the end of the hour, but I'm always bad about that.
I think they want to keep you around. It is election day, and this is a lot happier than what's been going on the news or anything else. So, and always, if you want to follow Nichole, you can always reach her at her website at NicholePaschal.com or on her Facebook page at facebook.com/Nichole Paschal Photography. Always, if you have additional questions and you've got to go, you can reach us at webinars@topazlabs.com, and you can sign up for additional webinars. We've got 2 more scheduled already at topazlabs.com/webinars. Nichole, thanks again so much for visiting us. Can't wait to get you back.
I've
Please come back every week. Please come back every week. And everybody who stuck around, thank you so much. It is election day, so hopefully we could bring a little brightness to your day. And we'll see you on a future webinar.